Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook. In this podcast, I dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us. In today's episode, I'm talking with Chris Van Lokeren, the Chief Information Officer at North Carolina Electric Membership Corporation. We discuss the importance of combining IT and engineering to incorporate DER into the ever-evolving power grid to create more value, improve your organization, and ultimately make your community a better place through improvements in reliability and dependability. Hello, Chris. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you for making the time to join us and sharing your knowledge and really regarding, for the sake of the podcast, all things DER. So before we get started, I just wanted to first give you a moment to introduce yourself, but then also for the listeners, just kind of give them an idea of like what your current responsibilities are, and then provide an overview of the utility structure that your efforts are within.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you very much for having me today. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. My name is Chris Van Lokeren. I'm currently the Chief Information Officer at North Carolina Electric Cooperatives. I've been in this role for about 3.5 years. We're what's known as a G&T cooperative. We have 26 members, distribution cooperatives in the state of North Carolina that we serve. They actually own us, and they procure their energy through contracts from us in some shape or fashion. We own roughly 45% of our generation through ownership interest in Catawba Nuclear Station in South Carolina, joint ownership of a combined cycle plant with Duke, also in South Carolina. We own 2 peaking plants in the southern part of North Carolina and some diesel plants that are used out on the Outer Banks, mostly for hurricanes and things of that nature. We we don't operate in an RTO. We're in the CERC part of the country, except for the very extreme northeast corner of the state, which is under PJM and Dominion. We have about 1 million meters that we serve among the different distribution cooperatives, and our peak load is around 4,500 megawatts. So not obviously the biggest, but we try and do the best we can. I think we're really excited about DER here at North Carolina Electric Cooperatives, and I think our members are. So I'm really excited about talking to you about this topic today, and let's see where we go. So thank you for having me.
Oh, great. And so just for our listeners, just to kind of level set, I'm a T&D, so I'm coming from the utility that owns transmission and the distribution wires. And we're speaking here with Chris, who really kind of owns the generation and then some of the lines to help facilitate the distribution of the electrons to all of the residential and C&I across this territory. So you ultimately have to oversee multiple municipalities or co-ops that serve as the distribution wires.
Right.
So to me, that's very unique. And, I've learned a lot just from talking to you a couple of times.
Right. Yeah. The other thing about the transmission just in North Carolina, from the big transmission in the state, is all really essentially Duke and Dominion. So I think we own 1 mile of transmission from one of our plants to get to a feeder. So anyway.
Right. Okay. So you may think, you're kind of not the facilitator of the distributed energy resources, which is what DER stands for. I hope that all that are listening knows that. But you just stated that you are fairly excited as an entity to embrace this DER. So kind of what is your first thoughts when you hear DER, and how are you kind of incorporating that into what you guys do?
I think a lot of folks in the utility industry are challenged by DER. I think we all have heard, for 100 years, it was generation, transmission, distribution, consumption of energy. And with DER coming on the other side, that obviously presents a lot of challenges. And the challenges can be things such as, unscrupulous solar developers overbuilding a solar panels on a member consumer's roof, and they're not getting the value that they were promised from that spend. It can be how to work with a big battery project or a microgrid project to ensure you're getting the economic benefits from those investments, that it's going to help NCMC and our members, save money, reduce their cost, or make themselves more efficient. And I think reliability is something that really is important with the DER resources. I think, for example, people may have read that North Carolina Electric Cooperatives has a microgrid called Butler Farm, which is down in Dunn, North Carolina. It is it's a hog farmer. He has anywhere between thousands of hogs that have to be fed, and then they poo, and so the poo goes to a lagoon, and he has covered these lagoons, and he is taking the methane from that hog poo and burning it in a generator, and then selling that back to us most of the time. But he's also put some solar panels there, and we put a Tesla battery on site as well, and we built this microgrid. And so that farm, if there was a reliability event, or if the power just went out in that area, that farm can island itself off. That and around 30 to 50 homes around the farm are island off and have resiliency and reliability. And so theoretically, the power would never go off there. We had another example of a microgrid that is just north of where I'm sitting in Raleigh, where a developer was trying to sell reliability and resiliency as a service, and he initially was going to go in and put a generator each home. It's a pretty small subdivision, about 25 homes or so. He was going to put a generator in each home and kind of sell resiliency and reliability. We took a look at what he was trying to do and said, well, maybe if we took a small area of land, put a generator in that could serve the whole neighborhood, put that in, put a battery in, build resiliency, reliability, and you could sell it that way just as easily. And there's an ancillary benefit for the cooperative that did that, and that they can use that generator as part of a customer-owned generation program and make some revenue on it as well. So I think microgrids especially have been something that I think we're really proud of, and we've got 3 or 4 in the pipeline, and we're excited to get these up and running, Elizabeth.
Right. And so, like, I heard a lot of, I think one thing about our industry is those that are in it, especially from the technical perspective and executing projects, no matter where we are, from utility ownership to a third-party developer to an aggregator of such, DER is a very large term, right? So right. When we say microgrids, that really involves customer generation. I also heard you talk about solar and how we have solar developers putting it across their grid. And then another area I remember kind of from our previous conversation that you guys have got involved with is kind of the whole engaging in demand response and or energy efficiency type programs.
Yeah. Right. That's a great point too. So what we've done a lot on the DR perspective is we've invested a lot in a DERMS, a distributed energy resource management system. That has really helped us have one pane of glass where we can invest to have all control of all these devices across the spectrum. So, the thermostats in people's homes, water heaters, we have roughly 20,000 of those actually deployed today across our state with our members. We have a constant voltage reduction that we can alert out to. We can control the microgrids that I talked about before. And for reliability purposes, we can control the solar QF or qualifying facilities that we subscribe to as well. And so when we look at DER, I think there are kind of 2 aspects to it. There is this reliability, resiliency, and then there's this optimization and economic benefit you're trying to drive out of it. And the end result sometimes for both those can be the same, but how you get there and what you use it, when you press the button, so to speak, can change based on the use case. And for our reliability purposes, we've actually created a DO. We've worked with a partner to staff a desk 24/7, where they're constantly waiting for a min-gen or a max-gen event, for example, and they could press the button to have these devices help with those types of issues that were to occur. So if God forbid a nuclear facility had to go offline, you have a min-gen event, you'd want to release all this DER onto the system to have the least amount of impact for your customers as you possibly could. And so that DO or that reliability service that we've stood up has really been helpful, and DER really makes that happen for us, Elizabeth. I think on the optimization side, it's more, how can we, clip our peak and ensure that we have our demand charges are as little as possible. And so we try to do that, and we use our DERMs to make that happen.
So I just have to share, everything that you just spoke of is just juicy with knowledge, right? And so I think, something for our listeners is when we think about how the grid came to be, when it first began, it was a generation source on the premise, wired up the house, the building, the railroad station, and it was there and it was controlled by the owner of that parcel. And then as we've grown the grid to the largest machine in the world, we took away that manual operation and started adding in automation and communication to all of these devices. So you spoke of pushing buttons and then things will happen. An evolution that we're having here as we all modernize our grid is the lines exist and they're owned and used. And as we transform to this new world, we have to install this type of communication, measuring, sensoring equipment to bring that capability not only to the utilities that own the assets, but third parties. So I guess kind of, from a CIO perspective, right, is very interesting because it's kind of becoming the backbone of the electric utility is truly the IT world, how to bring back these massive amounts of data streams and then be able to take action on them. So
No, I think that's a great point as well. And so, everything I talked about at the end of the day, how do you measure it? How do you verify it? And I think with the co-ops, one benefit, there's lots of benefits to the co-op model, but they're rural, and rural means far apart. And so what don't the distribution cooperatives want to have is a meter reader drive from house to house to read meters. So what they invest in probably earlier than maybe some of the other utilities in the country is AMI meters, mostly power line, but some are RFD mesh, and we can get access to that hourly data, and we're able to do the analysis after these events occur to measure load drop, to measure how we did, so to speak, Elizabeth. And I think that's important. You want to be able to you kind of put these programs out there, and you draw the IT picture and the engineering picture, and you kind of put it all together. You're like, this is what should happen. But at the end of the day, you want to measure and verify that it actually did. And so I think that's a really good example of the technology that we're implementing to show the value and the power of DER to our members.
Right, and just from being in the industry and understanding, the amount of assets that are out there that ultimately you guys are serving and help providing the generation and the resource to. If we think about it's a large lift and it costs money to invest in that capability to bring that awareness. So we've operated a grid for 90 plus years, and suddenly we now have access to this new technology. So some say that when we rolled out the AMI meters, like us, the utilities and the people that own that data or have access to the data didn't take action on it. But don't you think you have to actually deploy it and then bring it back and figure out how to bring it back?
Right.
And
Well, that's a great, I think, and it's less about, I think it goes hand in hand. As you think about DER, you've got to also either buy or rent or find out how to get somebody in your shop to do some data analytics. So you got all this data, and I think I came from the financial services industry before 4 years ago, and I think the thing I'd say in the financial services industry ran utilities, they'd figure out why people were turning on the light in the first place, right? So they use data for everything. You have a child, they're sending you sign up for a 529 plan. They just know they somehow they figure this thing out. I think that the utilities to me, are a little bit behind in the analytics space, and I think investing in analytics, it's a natural progression for utilities. We're all doing forecasting. Forecasting is analytics. Everybody has to do at least a long-term forecast. Probably most of us are doing short-term forecasts as well. So everyone's got kind of a foot in the door as far as analytics. Now, where do you want to take it? And so what data do you have as a utility that you can try and start asking some questions about and trying to figure out how to use that data and create value for your organization, efficiency or value or whatever you want to call it, but make your organization better. And I think a lot of the times when we ask those questions here, DER is the answer. And it's something that we can do. It's, this Butler Farm, it's showy, it's something you can point to in your community. And cooperatives we think about the community a lot and like, how do we help the community? And so this is something in this community where you can point to and see how the cooperative is helping to make their community better. So I think that's important.
So I know that, our listeners we don't want to keep this too long, but I think, the value that you provided, just being immersed in a very dynamic utility structure. I mean, you're different than the typical vertically integrated.
Yeah.
Your state commission is going to be different than your neighbor, and you ultimately you don't have an RTO. So
we don't have an RTO, and also we're not for the most part unregulated. The boards at the various cooperatives serve as the regulators. We rarely have to go to the commission on a few things. For the certificate of need, we have to go, but other than that, we're really not in front of the commission very often.
And then that's to some of our listeners, that's very powerful, right? So, and what you've been able to show is you've embraced this new grid edge technology.
Right.
You're utilizing the AMI, you've incorporated DERMS and you said DO, that's a distribution operation.
Distribution operator.
Into your facilities.
Yes.
Which is actually very advanced and further in the grid modernization plan than, a lot of other utilities. But what you have seen, though, is the benefit and the efficiency gain and the ability to optimize your grid by having that insight. And it's just for our listeners, DER, includes electric storage, intermittent generation, such as solar, just your typical distribution generation, CHP, fossil fuel, whatever is connected to the distribution. As we spoke about, the demand response and energy efficiency programs, and then of course the electric vehicle and the charging equipment associated with. So I guess I can't let you off the hook until I just ask, there's been a lot of talk about electric vehicles and transportation electrification in general. Is this a buzz within your entity?
Oh, sure. So we're building a cooperative charging network across the state of North Carolina. The rural areas are also sometimes vacation or touristy areas. So we've focused on those areas within the state. And we went to the state and asked for Volkswagen money to build chargers. And we've got roughly, I'd say like 50 or so level 2 chargers and about maybe not quite 20 level 3 chargers, fast chargers as part of this network. We've settled on just one of the EV charging providers, and we feel that EVs are going to be an important part of the future, and I think we don't want rural parts of North Carolina to be left behind. So we feel the fast chargers work really well, like gas stations and places like that, and level 2s like at the North Carolina Zoo, which is in Asheboro. They have a couple level 2 chargers or 3 or 4 level 2 chargers there, that you can charge while you go visit the animals and such. So we're really excited about EVs in the state. I had one, but I didn't work out for me exactly. So, but I'm going to get one, I think, in August of next year, and I'm excited about the future of EVs personally.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll leave you with one more question, and it's just more or less, what do you believe could be, out of those technologies we spoke of, the great opportunity for the industry as a whole to kind of?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to me, and I don't think this is going to be too revolutionary, but I think batteries and storage is really the next, thing that we have to conquer. I think, I met Elizabeth at the AEIC meeting, and, at that meeting, it seemed like hydrogen was more what a lot of people were talking about, but I'm not sure we're there yet. But I think, for us, rural North Carolina cooperatives, we're focused on batteries. We have, around 100 megawatts of batteries that we want to deploy in the next couple of years. And we're excited about what the batteries can offer. I think, figuring out when to charge them, when to discharge them, building that all into our DERMS platform. we've actually tinkered around a little bit with using AI to look at some of those charging algorithms to try and get the most benefit for our use of the batteries. So, we're excited about storage, and we think that's really going to be the next big opportunity for us. I guess the last thing I'd say is some of our batteries we can only put power in from the solar facility that's right next to it. So that's even harder algorithm to write. So, but yeah, we're very excited about it, and we think that's gonna be the next big thing.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And
yeah.
So batteries to come.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I just thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And, all things DER is a topic that is large and expansive, as we kind of got into many areas today. But I believe it's worth our listeners' time and energy, no pun intended, to really start to dig in and define, discuss, and understand, where we are heading with our new energy economy. So with that, that's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Until then, keep powering on.